My beloved child, stop for a moment. Not because I want to frighten you. Not because I want to pressure you. But because tonight's story begins with a letter. A letter that nobody expected. A letter that sat unnoticed, unread, unopened, ignored. And child, the most shocking part of this story is not what was written inside that letter. The most shocking part is what happened because it was ignored. Stay with me until the end. Because the meaning of the letter will not be revealed immediately. It unfolds piece by piece. And when the final truth becomes visible, you will understand why one message can change the direction of an entire life. The story begins on an ordinary morning. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt different. The sun rose like every other day. The streets looked the same. The routine felt familiar. Yet hidden inside that ordinary day was something extraordinary. A message. A warning. An opportunity. A truth waiting to be discovered. Now imagine walking past a door every day for years. Never opening it. Never looking inside. Never wondering what it contains. Child. That was exactly what happened. Because the person in this story had become so focused on surviving daily life that they stopped paying attention to the quiet signals around them. The small reminders. The gentle nudges. The moments that seemed insignificant. Yet sometimes the smallest moments carry the biggest lessons. For months, life felt confusing. Plans were delayed. Questions remained unanswered. Certain doors refused to open. Certain opportunities seemed to disappear. And slowly, frustration began growing. Not anger. Frustration. The kind that whispers, "Why is nothing changing? Why do I keep feeling stuck? Why does it feel like something is missing?" Child. Those questions followed them everywhere. But the answers were closer than they realized. Much closer. One evening, while organizing old belongings, they discovered something unexpected. A sealed envelope. Not hidden. Not lost. Simply forgotten. And that detail matters. Because many people spend years searching for answers that were already placed in front of them. The envelope looked ordinary. Nothing special. No dramatic markings. No signs that it contained anything important. Yet something about it felt different. Something about it demanded attention. Now imagine finding an old journal entry written by a younger version of yourself. A version of yourself that still believed certain dreams were possible. Child. That is the feeling that entered the room. Curiosity. Reflection. Anticipation. The person held the envelope for several moments. Looking at it. Thinking about it. Wondering why it had never been opened. Wondering how long it had been sitting there. Wondering what might be inside. And child. What happened next changed everything. Because before opening the letter, a memory suddenly returned. A conversation. A warning. A piece of advice given years earlier. Advice that seemed ordinary at the time. Advice that now felt incredibly important. For the first time, they realized something. The biggest dangers in life are not always the ones rushing toward us. Sometimes the biggest danger is ignoring something important for too long. Ignoring wisdom. Ignoring growth. Ignoring opportunities. Ignoring truth. And that realization hit harder than expected. The room became quiet. Very quiet. The kind of quiet that appears when a person realizes they may have overlooked something valuable. Something life-changing. Something meant for them. Then, slowly, they opened the envelope. And child. The first sentence inside left them completely speechless. Not because it predicted the future. Not because it contained a secret. Because it revealed a truth they had been avoiding for years. A truth about their choices. A truth about their direction. A truth about who they were becoming. And suddenly, everything looked different. Your breakthrough is waiting behind that QR code and the link in the pinned comment. God has brought you to this video for a reason, to test your faithfulness. Stop letting past errors hold your destiny captive. Sow your sacrificial seed today. The Almighty is personally examining your heart through this offering. Give generously right now, and unlock a wave of supernatural blessings that will overflow into your life and protect your children's future forever. The letter did not accuse them. The letter did not condemn them. The letter did something much more powerful. It forced them to reflect, to pause, to examine their path honestly. And honesty can be uncomfortable. But honesty can also be transformational. The more they read, the more emotional they became. Because line after line seemed to describe things they knew deep down but rarely admitted. Missed opportunities, delayed decisions, ignored callings, unfinished goals, dreams placed on hold, promises made to themselves and forgotten. Child. The letter felt personal. Not because it knew their future. Because it reminded them of what they already knew in their heart. And that reminder changed everything. Right now, a sacred opportunity is visible on your screen. Scan the QR code or click the link pinned in the comments and description below to sow your seed of faith. We have all stumbled blindly and made mistakes in life, but God is offering you a divine moment of confession and redemption today. Do not let this moment pass. By sowing a sacrificial seed of donation right now, you are initiating a spiritual harvest. The Almighty Himself will examine your offering, and the blessings of your generosity will return to you multiplied, securing divine favor not just for your future, but for generations to come. Sow your seed today and change your destiny. But my beloved child, the most shocking part of the letter has not yet been revealed. Because hidden deeper inside was one statement. One statement that would force them to question everything they thought they understood about their life. A statement so powerful that it would keep them awake long after midnight. A statement that would completely change the way they saw their future. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word awake. Because sometimes the greatest blessing is finally waking up to a truth that has been waiting for your attention. And if you're ready for part 2, type 2. Because the next chapter reveals the shocking statement hidden inside the letter and why it changed everything. Part 2. My beloved child. If you are still here, then stay close to this message. Because what happened after that envelope was opened is where the story truly begins. Not with the discovery. Not with the letter itself. But with the realization it created. And child, some realizations arrive so quietly that they don't seem important at first. Then days later, weeks later, even years later, you realize they changed everything. When we left the story, the person had finally opened the forgotten envelope. The room was silent. The world outside continued moving. Cars passed. Clocks ticked. Life carried on. Yet inside that room, time felt different. Because the first few lines of the letter had already reached somewhere deep inside their heart. Not because the words were dramatic. Because the words were honest. Painfully honest. And honesty has a way of finding the places excuses cannot protect. The person continued reading. Slowly. Carefully. Almost as if they were afraid of what the next page might reveal. Not because the letter felt threatening. Because it felt accurate. Too accurate. Now imagine looking into a mirror that reflects more than your appearance. A mirror that reflects your habits. Your choices. Your priorities. Your fears. Child. That was exactly what this letter felt like. And the deeper they read, the harder it became to look away. The next section of the letter contained a question. A simple question. Only a few words. Yet those few words stopped everything. The question was, what have you been postponing that you already know matters? Silence. Complete silence. Because suddenly dozens of answers rushed into their mind. Dreams they delayed. Conversations they avoided. Goals they promised themselves they would start someday. Decisions they kept postponing. Truths they already knew. And child. That is what made the question so powerful. It didn't reveal something new. It revealed something familiar. Something they already knew deep down. The room felt smaller. The silence felt louder. Because for the first time in a long time, they stopped blaming circumstances. Stopped blaming timing. Stopped blaming luck. And started asking a different question. If I already know what matters, why haven't I acted on it? That question followed them through every line of the letter. Because suddenly the issue wasn't information. The issue was action. And there is a big difference. Many people believe their life will change when they discover the right answer. But child, sometimes the answer has been sitting in front of them for years. The challenge is not finding the answer. The challenge is acting on it. The letter continued. Each paragraph seemed to pull back another layer. Not of the future. Of the present. The life they were living right now. The habits they repeated. The opportunities they ignored. The excuses they accepted. The comfort zones they refused to leave. And with every page, the truth became harder to avoid. Then something unexpected happened. A memory returned. Not a major memory. Not a dramatic memory. A small memory. The kind people usually forget. A moment years earlier when someone gave them advice. Advice they nodded at. Agreed with. Then ignored. Now imagine finding a map years after getting lost. Only to realize the map had the correct directions all along. Child. That was exactly how it felt. Because suddenly they understood that wisdom had been appearing throughout their life. Again and again. The problem wasn't that nobody warned them. The problem was that they weren't ready to listen. And that realization hit harder than anything else. The QR code on your screen and the link in the pinned comment are your gateway to a fresh start. God is giving you this exact moment to confess your unseen wrongs and correct your path. Sow your seed right now without fear. God is analyzing your heart today, and the donation you make will trigger a divine reaction. Expect a massive turnaround in your life, and a permanent blessing that will feed your lineage for centuries. Secure it today. The deeper they read, the more emotional they became. Not because the letter was negative, because it was challenging. The letter refused to allow them to remain comfortable. It refused to allow them to remain passive. It refused to allow them to keep pretending that later would somehow solve everything. And child, the truth is that later has stolen countless dreams. Not because people lacked potential. Because they kept waiting. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for perfect timing. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for permission. The letter confronted all of it. Line by line. Question by question. Reflection by reflection. Until finally, they reached the statement. The statement hinted at in the previous chapter. The statement that changed everything. The statement that kept them awake long after midnight. The statement was simple. Shockingly simple. It said, "The future you keep hoping for is being built by the choices you make today." Silence. The room became completely still. Because suddenly everything connected. Every delay. Every excuse. Every missed opportunity. Every unfinished goal. Every decision. Everything. And child, that sentence felt impossible to ignore. Because it carried responsibility. Real responsibility. Not blame. Responsibility. The empowering realization that while not everything is within our control, some things are. And those things matter more than we often realize. Scan the QR code or click the link below immediately to sow your seed of faith. This is God's direct invitation to wash away past regrets and write a new story. The seed you sow today goes straight to the Creator's ledger. He will witness your sacrifice and return it to you 100-fold, establishing a divine shield of wealth and peace over your bloodline for generations to come. Do not hesitate, sow your seed now. For a long time they sat there staring at the page. Not reading. Thinking. Reflecting. Questioning. And for the first time in years, they stopped worrying about what they might lose, and started thinking about what they could become. That shift changed everything. Because fear focuses on loss. Growth focuses on possibility. And possibility was finally becoming visible. But my beloved child, the biggest revelation is still ahead. Because hidden in the final pages of the letter is a message so personal, so direct, and so transformative that it forces the reader to completely rethink the direction of their life. A message that reveals why the letter appeared at exactly the right moment. A message that changes everything. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word today. Because the future is not built tomorrow. It is built through what we choose today. And if you're ready for part 3, type 3. Because the next chapter reveals the most powerful message hidden inside the letter. Part 3. My beloved child, stay here. Do not rush through this chapter. Because what happens next is the reason the letter remained unforgettable. Not because it contained a prediction. Not because it revealed a secret. But because it exposed something the reader had spent years hiding from themselves. And child, the truths we hide from ourselves are often the ones that shape our lives the most. When we left the previous chapter, the reader had just encountered a sentence that shook them completely. The future you keep hoping for is being built by the choices you make today. Simple words. Yet those words refused to leave their mind. Because suddenly they understood something. The future wasn't arriving someday. The future was arriving now. One choice at a time. One habit at a time. One decision at a time. And that realization changed everything. The room remained quiet. The letter remained open. Yet they weren't reading anymore. They were thinking. Deeply. The kind of thinking that forces a person to confront themselves honestly. And honesty can be uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Because honesty removes excuses. It removes distractions. It removes illusions. And what remains is truth. The reader slowly turned the page. Not because they were eager. Because they needed to know what came next. Something inside them already sensed that the most important message had not yet been revealed. And they were right. The next section of the letter felt different. The tone shifted. The questions became deeper. The reflections became more personal. The message became impossible to ignore. The first line on the page asked, "What dream have you quietly abandoned while pretending you still believe in it?" The question hit like lightning. Not because it was complicated. Because it was direct. Child. Some questions are powerful because they reveal information. Others are powerful because they reveal avoidance. This was the second kind. Immediately, a memory appeared. Then another. Then another. Dreams. Goals. Plans. Promises made to themselves years earlier. Promises they once spoke about with excitement. Promises they once believed. With all their heart. Promises they slowly stopped talking about. Not because they stopped caring. Because disappointment made them afraid to hope. And child. Fear has a way of disguising itself. Sometimes fear looks like procrastination. Sometimes fear looks like distraction. Sometimes fear looks like being realistic. But underneath, it is still fear. The letter continued. Each sentence seemed to uncover another layer. Another hidden truth. Another uncomfortable realization. The reader began noticing a pattern. Every major regret in their life had something in common. Not failure. Avoidance. Read that again. Because it matters. The pain wasn't coming from the things that failed. The pain was coming from the things never attempted. The conversations never started. The opportunities never pursued. The risks never taken. The dreams quietly placed aside. And suddenly, that realization became impossible to ignore. The room felt heavier. Not because the letter was negative. Because it was revealing. Revealing things they already knew but rarely admitted. A divine portal of restoration is open right now on your screen. Scan the QR code or click the link waiting for you in the description and pinned comment to sow your seed. If you have been carrying the weight of past mistakes and hidden regrets, recognize this moment. God has orchestrated this exact second for your confession and spiritual cleansing. This is your chance to make it right. By stepping forward with your donation today, you are releasing a seed directly into the hands of the Creator. God is personally testing your heart and examining your faithfulness today. In return, He will unlock a supernatural harvest that will overflow into your life and shield your lineage for generations to come. Sow your seed now and claim your breakthrough. Then came a story written inside the letter. A short story. Simple. Yet powerful. It described a traveler standing at a crossroads. One road looked familiar, safe, comfortable, predictable. The other road looked uncertain, unclear, risky. The traveler stood there for years, thinking, analyzing, waiting, hoping for certainty. Child. Eventually the traveler realized something important. The greatest risk was not choosing the uncertain road. The greatest risk was standing still forever. The reader stopped. Completely stopped. Because suddenly they saw themselves inside the story. They recognized the pattern. The waiting. The hesitation. The endless preparation without action. The constant search for perfect timing. And for the first time, they admitted something. Perfect timing never arrived. It never had. Because perfect timing is often just another name for fear. That realization hit hard. Very hard. The more they reflected, the more they understood how much life had been waiting for them to move. Not perfectly. Not fearlessly. Simply move. One step. Then another. Then another. And child. That realization changed everything. Because action creates clarity. Waiting rarely does. Look at the QR code on your screen, or click the link in the description and pinned comment right now. God knows the hidden guilt you've carried from past mistakes. This is your divine window to confess, release that burden, and sow your seed. What you donate today isn't just money. It's a seed directly evaluated by God Himself. He will multiply this sacrifice, breaking every financial curse and securing an eternal harvest for you and your future generations. Act now. Then came the most powerful page so far. A page that felt almost personal. Almost as though it had been written specifically for them. At the top of the page was a single sentence. A sentence they would never forget. A sentence they would think about for years. The sentence said, "You do not need another sign. You need a decision." Silence. Complete silence. The kind of silence that follows truth. The kind of silence that leaves no room for excuses. Because suddenly every reason they had been waiting disappeared. Every justification lost its power. Every delay looked different. And child, that sentence exposed the real issue. The problem was never lack of information. The problem was hesitation. The problem was indecision. The problem was waiting for certainty before acting. And certainty rarely arrives before movement. That realization shook them deeply. Because it meant the next chapter of life would not be determined by luck. It would be determined by choices. Their choices. And for the first time in a very long time, that responsibility felt empowering instead of frightening. The letter remained open on the table. The room remained silent. Yet inside, something had changed. A shift. A turning point. A moment of awakening. Not because they suddenly had all the answers. Because they finally understood the right question. The question was not, "What if I fail?" The question was, "What happens if I never begin?" And child, that question changed everything. But my beloved child, the greatest message is still waiting. Because hidden in the final pages of the letter is a truth so powerful that it transforms fear into action, doubt into clarity, and hesitation into purpose. A truth that explains why the letter appeared at exactly the right moment. A truth that becomes the turning point of the entire story. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word decision. Because a single decision can change the direction of an entire life. And if you're ready for part 4, type 4. Because the next chapter reveals the final message hidden inside the letter. Part 4, Final Chapter. My beloved child, do not leave now. Not when we have come this far together. Because this final chapter contains the truth that was hidden inside every previous chapter. The truth behind the warning. The truth behind the fear. The truth behind the feeling that something important was standing at the door. And child, when this truth finally becomes clear, you may realize that the bad news was never what you thought it was. When we ended the previous chapter, the person had discovered a sentence that completely changed their perspective. The greatest danger is never becoming the person you could have been. Those words stayed with them. Through the evening. Through the night. Through every quiet moment. Because suddenly they understood something that most people never stop to consider. Life is not only measured by what we do. Life is also measured by what we continuously avoid doing. The opportunities ignored. The gifts neglected. The courage postponed. The purpose delayed. And child, that realization was impossible to escape. The next morning arrived. The sun rose. The streets came alive. The world continued exactly as it always had. Yet the person felt different. Because awareness changes everything. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you recognize a pattern, you cannot pretend it isn't there. And for the first time in years, they stopped blaming circumstances, stopped blaming timing, stopped blaming luck, stopped blaming other people, and asked themselves one simple question. What would happen if I finally took responsibility for the future I keep hoping for? Silence. Your breakthrough is waiting behind that QR code and the link in the pinned comment. God has brought you to this video for a reason, to test your faithfulness. Stop letting past errors hold your destiny captive. Sow your sacrificial seed today. The Almighty is personally examining your heart through this offering. Give generously right now, and unlock a wave of supernatural blessings that will overflow into your life and protect your children's future forever. Because deep down, they already knew the answer. Everything would change. Not overnight. Not magically. But steadily. Powerfully. Meaningfully. And child, that is when the final message of the warning became clear. The warning was never about a catastrophe approaching. The warning was about complacency. The silent danger that slowly convinces people to settle, to lower their expectations, to abandon their dreams, to accept less than what they are capable of becoming. And complacency is dangerous because it rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, disguised as comfort, disguised as routine, disguised as, I'll do it later. Before long, years have passed, opportunities have passed, seasons have passed, and people find themselves wondering where the time went. The person finally understood that, and it shook them deeply, because they realized they had spent too much time waiting for confidence, waiting for certainty, waiting for perfect conditions, waiting for proof, when all along, Life was waiting for participation. Life was waiting for movement. Life was waiting for a decision. Look at the QR code on your screen, or click the link in the description and pinned comment right now. God knows the hidden guilt you've carried from past mistakes. This is your divine window to confess, release that burden, and sow your seed. What you donate today isn't just money, it's a seed directly evaluated by God Himself. He will multiply this sacrifice, breaking every financial curse and securing an eternal harvest for you and your future generations. Act now. The room felt peaceful now. Not because every problem was solved. Because clarity had arrived. And clarity brings peace. The person looked back over every page of the letter. Every question. Every challenge. Every uncomfortable truth. And suddenly they noticed something remarkable. None of the pages were trying to predict the future. Every page was trying to prepare them for it. There is a difference. A very important difference. Prediction creates dependence. Preparation creates strength. The letter was not saying, "Here is what will happen." The letter was saying, "Here is who you must become." And child, that changed everything. Because suddenly the focus shifted away from fear, away from uncertainty, away from worrying about tomorrow, and toward growth, toward character, toward responsibility, toward purpose, the things a person can actually control. The QR code on your screen and the link in the pinned comment are your gateway to a fresh start. God is giving you this exact moment to confess your unseen wrongs and correct your path. Sow your seed right now without fear. God is analyzing your heart today, and the donation you make will trigger a divine reaction. Expect a massive turnaround in your life, and a permanent blessing that will feed your lineage for centuries. Secure it today. Then came the final paragraph. The final message. The message that tied every chapter together. The message that explained why the warning appeared exactly when it did. The person read the final words slowly, carefully, almost afraid for the story to end. The paragraph said, "One day you will stand in the future you are creating right now." The person stopped breathing for a moment, then continued reading. "And on that day, you will either thank yourself for the courage you showed today." A pause. Then the final line. "Or you will wish you had started sooner." Silence. Complete silence. Because suddenly everything made sense. The warning. The questions. The reflections. The discomfort. The fear. The hesitation. Everything. The bad news was never that disaster was approaching. The bad news was the possibility of reaching the future and discovering that fear made too many decisions. That hesitation stole too many opportunities. That comfort delayed too much growth. That potential remained unused. And child, that realization changed the person's life forever. Because for the first time, they understood that the future is not something we enter. The future is something we build. Choice by choice. Day by day. Decision by decision. And once they understood that, they stopped waiting. Stopped postponing. Stopped searching for permission. And finally began moving forward. My beloved child, before this story ends, remember this. The most dangerous thing in life is not failure. Failure teaches. Failure grows. Failure strengthens. The most dangerous thing is allowing fear to convince you that you still have unlimited time. Because time moves. Seasons change. Opportunities shift. And eventually every person must decide whether they will answer the call on their life or continue delaying it. That was the real warning. Not fear. Awakening. Not destruction. Responsibility. Not bad news. Truth. Before you leave this final chapter, comment the word today. Because the future is built by what we choose today. And tell us, what is one decision you know you need to stop postponing? Until next time, my beloved child. Remember this. The warning at your door was never meant to scare you. It was meant to wake you up before another year passed without becoming the person you were created to be.